Hi, and welcome to what is a brief update video on SimpleBake. So the last video I made was back in May of 2021. There have been quite a few updates and changes and tweaks, etc. So I just want to go through a few of those now so that my previous video won't seem so completely out of date. The first one of those is just a change to the general UI. So ironically for SimpleBake, it was becoming quite cluttered and quite complicated. So instead of having everything sort of laid out at once, you've now got this collapsible menu system. So you can go through and set the settings and then hide them when you're done, and hopefully that will make it a little easier just to kind of work with the SimpleBake panel. So not earth-shattering, but I think it's probably an improvement. Unfortunately, it means every video that's been recorded before I did that now looks completely different because the interface has changed. But yeah, so hopefully just a little bit easier to work with. So the second big change probably worth mentioning is presets. So I've already opened the panel here, but this allows you to define presets for all your different settings in SimpleBake. So you see here if I select some options, also you'll notice I've opened some tabs, I've changed the resolution, I've ticked some things, etc. If I go up here, give the preset a name, my new preset, and then I click here to save the preset, it goes into the list. And that preset will then be available in any blend file. So if I open a new blend file and I go over here to presets again, by clicking on the little tick icon, which is load, I can load all those settings, and you see it restores both my interface to exactly what I saved, and also all the individual settings. Again, equally, if you want to delete a preset, you can get rid of it just by going here, deleting it, and it's gone. If you're interested, and you may well not be, SimpleBake stores its presets sort of here. So if you go to your add-ons directory, and then if you go up to the kind of I'm actually in the 2.3 directory there, but if you go into your kind of data directory for Blender, which you should be able to find, it'll look different on different operating systems. But if you go to the Blender documentation, you can, I'll try and remember to put a link in the description to this video, but it stores it in this directory called data, which is up one from your Blender version directory, and then it just stores it there. You may not be interested in that, but I'm the kind of person who likes to know what software I'm using is doing. So if that interests you, it's there, and that's where it stores its data. So I stole this idea from the developer of Gaffer, who also stores the data for Gaffer in that directory. So I've pilfered that. But yeah, so that's how presets work. Okay, so the next thing that's worth mentioning is just a slight change to how texture resolution is selected. So let's make it less confusing. Let's just get rid of the other bits of the interface. So you may remember that here used to be a row of buttons, 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, etc. Someone suggested quite rightly to me that the buttons weren't that useful, so they were quite often entering a texture resolution above 6K, for example, and there were no buttons above 6K. And also they were almost never selecting 3K, for example, which was one of the buttons, which made a lot of sense. So now it's a lot more flexible. You just go up and down. Probably wouldn't recommend baking at 10K, not on my computer, but you can just select these as you see fit. You see the output resolution goes along with it. So if you haven't watched the previous video, the output resolution is a way of, you'd mostly use it in this way. So you'd bake at, let's say, 8K, and then you scale down to 4K, and by doing that you kind of get a anti-aliasing type effect because you're baking at a higher resolution but scaling your images down. But anyway, just in terms of the interface, they move in sync unless you change these, and then obviously they stop. Everything else remains the same. So that's that. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is channel packing. So I need to be exporting my bakes, so I will just turn that on now. I'm baking, I just want to bake diffuse and roughness because that's what we're going to use in this example. I've got special bake turned on as well. Actually add cube as a bake object. So there we go. So I'll hide all that for now. So here, I have to give thanks to one SimpleBake user who gave me some coding tips because I didn't know how to do this for the longest time. But now I'm pleased to say we've finally got like a completely flexible channel packing system. So it doesn't rely anymore on me hard coding certain options. You can literally define whatever textures you want, select what goes in the red, green, blue, alpha, give it a name, give it a file format. I'd stick to OpenEXR if you can, because I've noticed some weird quirks in how Blender exports different file formats, but um, OpenEXR is extremely reliable for channel packing, so use that if you can. So I'll give it a name, pack texture's fine, so I'll leave that. I'm going to set R to diffuse, green to diffuse, blue to diffuse, and alpha to roughness, and I'm going to add that to my list. I can add as many as I want, and what will happen is SimpleBake will go through, it will bake the maps you've asked for, then it will create the channel pack textures, and they'll all get spit out into the folder where all your textures get outputted. So let's do that now quickly. Sorry, before we do actually, you can see that I've plugged magic texture for some color into the diffuse socket and into the roughness socket just so we can see it. I've plugged a nice distinct Musgrave texture. So let's do that now. I'll just bake that quickly. Okay, so it's outputted to the folder like we told it to. I've got my roughness, I've got my PNG, and I've also got a file called channelpack.exr. So the easiest way to see how that's worked is if I open it in Blender, and I can see on the color channel, we've got that magic texture, which is represented by red, green, and blue. And on the alpha channel, we've got that Musgrave texture. So you can see that's worked quite nicely. Yeah, so hopefully channel packing will be a lot more, well, is a lot more flexible, is a lot more usable, and will be a lot more useful. Okay, so the final thing to talk about is a change to the interface for background bakes. So if you've seen the previous video I did, I was talking about you can bake in the foreground and Blender will kind of lock up until it's done, or you can fire off bakes into the background. And I was saying in the previous video, you may take the view that you always bake in the background. There's really not a lot of reason not to. I mean, I certainly do, but certain people like to still bake in the front, in the foreground, so that's why that's kind of still the default option. The first change to the interface is you now give each background task a name, so you can identify what they were, perhaps whether you want to keep them or not. Just generally kind of, it's more like creating tasks. So the old interface, you fired them off, and then there was one button, and you would import everything that was done, you would discard everything that was done, and that was about it. This allows you to define different tasks, give them different names, and just fire them off into the background. So let's just double check I'm baking the cube. Don't want to bake all those. Let's just bake diffuse and roughness because that's what I'm using as my example here. We're not baking anything special. 4K is probably okay. I do want to give the bakes a chance to kind of be in the background so you can see them in the list. We won't export them, it doesn't matter. So I'll just fire one off now, and you can see it's here, and I'll get an update as to its progress as it goes along. I can add more so that they continue to bake. There we go. And then they will bake until they're done. So I'll pause the video briefly so you're not sat here waiting for them. We can see what happens when they've finished. And now we can see that the first one, oh, they've both finished. So don't know if you saw that, but now they're both ready. Let's say that I decided I didn't want the second one, so I'll just get rid of that. And then the first one I will import. You can see it's told me I've imported two textures, 0 objects, because we didn't choose to, we didn't use this option here, copy objects and apply bake. So there's no objects, but we got our two textures, so they should be the base color and the roughness. Yeah, there we go. Base color or diffuse, and the roughness, which was that Musgrave texture. So that's it. Again, hopefully that will make background baking easier to handle and easier to manage. And yeah, good stuff. Okay, so I hope that was useful. I'm sure it's not the highest quality YouTube production you've ever seen, but I felt like it was a good idea just to do well, I'm hoping to do more of these quick videos because SimpleBake's changing all the time. I'm constantly adding things and fiddling with the interface, and I am aware that I haven't really done a lot of tutorial videos, and there's quite a lot of tutorial videos out there for SimpleBake done by other people, but every time I drastically change it, I kind of make them slightly out of date. So I do want to start doing my own videos, just showing how the add-on's progressing and how things are changing, and hopefully that will be useful to people. So yeah, thank you very much for your time.